Hi there, thank you for joining me today. In my last video, I began to talk about God's amazing grace, and we explored the meaning of the word grace through looking at the Hebrew word chesed in the Old Testament, that word that's so often translated as loving kindness. And today I want to show you grace in action, and I want you to listen to this. I'm going to tell you a story, a true story, about a young man called Mirabal, and I want you to listen to this story right to the end, because you are going to be amazed when you see what this story is all about. And I'm going to talk to you today about Mirabal. Now, Mirabal was a young man who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was born into a rich family, and not just a rich family, into a royal family. In fact, his grandfather was the king of Israel, Saul. But you may not have heard of Mirabal, and the reason for that is that in the Bible he is referred to by the name Mephibosheth. Mirabal should have had a charmed life, but life has the habit of throwing a curveball at us, and that's what happened to Mirabal, or Mephibosheth as we will call him. Mirabal was the son of a disgraced family, because when he was only 5 years old, his father and his grandfather were killed in battle, defeated by the Philistines, and they both died on the same day. And Mephibosheth was involved in an accident. He was dropped by his nurse, and he suffered permanent injury. He became permanently disabled. He was unable to walk. And when we take up the story, in the days of King David, poor Mephibosheth had nothing going for him. He was actually living in hiding, because Mephibosheth lived in fear of the day that a knock would come to his door. And that day came. There came a time when David's mind turned to Saul, and David asked the question, is there anyone left of the house of Saul? If any other king had spoken those words, it would have been to sign Mephibosheth's death warrant. But David was a man who knew and loved the Lord. And it's even said of David that he was a man after God's own heart. And when David asked the question, is there anyone left of the house of Saul, he wasn't asking it to do away with Saul's descendant, but he was asking that he might show the loving kindness, the grace of God to that man. He said, is there anyone left of the house of Saul, that I might show chesed, that I might show loving kindness to him? And the knock came to Mephibosheth's door. David's men had arrived, but David's men had not arrived to do away with Mephibosheth. David's men brought Mephibosheth to Jerusalem and into the royal court. And that day, when the poor helpless cripple was carried in to the presence of the king, David changed his life. David gave him all the land and property that his grandfather King Saul had owned, and he supplied him with servants to work the land, and he gave him free access to the royal court and into the presence of the king. In fact, he ordered that Mephibosheth should dine at the table of King David every day of his life. And this poor guy living in obscurity, living in virtual poverty, was made rich by the generosity of David. David impoverished himself to give to Mephibosheth because all the land, all the property that Saul had owned had become David's. But yet David gave it to this young man who himself said he was nothing more than a dead dog. And David impoverished himself to make Mephibosheth rich. And the word used in Hebrew to describe this is chesed. Loving kindness, grace. And I want to tell you, my brother, my sister, that this is the grace. This is the amazing grace that God has lavished upon you, because He impoverished Himself to make you rich. The Lord Jesus left the throne of glory to come to earth and to be born as a helpless baby. He gave His back to the smiters and His face to those who spat upon Him and pulled out His beard, to those who would nail Him to a tree and leave Him to die, so that you could become rich, so that you could become a child of the King and be adopted into the most royal of families, that you could be adopted as a child of the King of Kings and the Lord of glory. You see, what David did for Mephibosheth was a picture of what God has done for you and for me. You see, this is grace. This is what's so amazing about grace. Mephibosheth, a man of shame, a dead dog, regarded as nothing, was given everything by David. And so we, people of shame who have inherited nothing but sin and shame from our first parents, have been made rich by the grace, the amazing grace of God. Every time I think about this, I think about Psalm 23. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. We are sitting at the King's table today. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup overfloweth. Surely goodness and mercy, goodness and chesed, goodness and the loving kindness of the Lord will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. My friend, this is grace. This is amazing. This is grace. This is the love of God for you.